Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unsung Podcast. Today I'm joined by Haley. We cross paths on a little Facebook page for finding and looking for a guest, and she reached out and has quite an incredible story. So I'm like, you got to come on with me. So here we are.
Hello.
Welcome to my show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we've got quite a lot to talk about, but I'm just going to hand you the mic and you can tell my listeners whatever you'd like them to know about you.
All right, cool. So I have written my first book that is going to be releasing April 8th, and it is an autobiography slash self-help book. It's a means to inspire others through female empowerment, and it's essentially my hero's journey. My book really begins with the greatest love story of my life and how it was the greatest love and someone that I truly envisioned on marrying and spending happily ever after with. He opened up in the beginning about him being an addict, and that was something my 22-year-old self was not able to fully digest. However, I also didn't really see any problems, and things kind of eventually started taking a big shift where his toxic traits started coming out. He started manipulating me. He was a narcissist. He had anger issues. And so he took a lot of it out on me. And it really broke me down heavily. And it especially was the worst after the first year for about 4 or 5 months. And then I secretly moved out and escaped. And after a few months of us being separate, he started getting into drugs and hanging out with the wrong people. And when we got back together a few months in, he brought heroin into our lives. And it took me about 3, 4 months before I became dependent. And we went through the ultimate highs and lows of living off heroin and having our wallets, our bank accounts just soon evaporated. I even went as far as like asking my mom for loans left and right. And we got to the point where everything was so bad that he wanted to leave LA when we were both pursuing acting and modeling. And once right before we left, we were living out of our car for a few days and drove across country with detoxing as well because we wanted to be clean, arriving into Wisconsin, his hometown, and not be under the influence of any sorts in front of his family, especially with my ex being someone who's had a drug problem for many, many years and also going to rehab a good 3, 4 times without not coming out a changed man and living through sobriety. We eventually just got back into it thanks to my ex reuniting with someone who we knew already had about 6 felonies under his belt loop and also a heroin and crack addict for the last 6 years at that point. And things took another wild turn where we ended up getting even more heavily addicted, adding crack to the mix. So we were doing crack and heroin at the same time. And my ex lost his job. This other friend of my ex's with the record and drug abuse. He was jobless, living off mommy and daddy's money. And I call him the mastermind in my book because he truly was. And he was such a great manipulator. Even my ex warned me about him before we met him. And when I met him, it was the first time ever in my life where my intuition and I spoke up loud and said, you know what? This is someone I do not want you hanging out with. He is bad news. He's going to take you down with him. And a few months later, we ended up getting married. And then a few weeks later after that, things really got heavily shooken upside down where criminal activity started taking place. And I was young and naive and I didn't know better. And I ended up being a part of the ride because at that point I completely lost sight of who I was, living in another demonic version of myself, if anything, where it's like I completely changed. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I was just at such a low point, heavily induced by drugs at such a groundbreaking time in our lives that I ended up being a part of their journeys with stealing and reselling for money for drugs. I didn't take any action, but I was along for the ride, which is still a crime that I did not know at the time.
Mhm.
And it eventually spiraled after a few months of that to the point where we all got turned in, we all got busted. I was told that I was just a witness and that they really were after the mastermind guy, Joe. And apparently now my boyfriend at the time, my husband, and with that, again, being so young and naive to everything, I ended up just spilling the beans on everything and not leaving anything unturned. And I feel like I got really lucky because the detective, he actually had a daughter named Haley as well. And so he had a natural soft spot for me, but then he also could, he could see like that my ex had a lot of anger issues and the kind of toxic person he was. So in a way, it's like he was kind of being a father figure to me, but at the same time doing his job and really trying to investigate and get everything out of me that he possibly can.
So
And
did you see like on like the detective shows, Chicago PD, where they come in and they throw a little piece of paper on the table and like, hey, you give us everything on this guy, and you can walk out of here and you got an hour to think about it and leave the room.
um kind of. I mean, in a way, it's like he really just like cracked open everything and investigated as much as I would bring to the table. And I really did not hold back. I started bawling my eyes out, even though I was under the influence at the time. I started crying my eyes out because, like, a month or two before the day we got booked, my intuition was speaking loudly to me that something really bad is going to happen. And I kept being the little boy that cried wolf to my mom, like, Mom, something really bad's going to happen. And she's wanting to help. Even one of my best friends from LA was wanting to help. But I just didn't have the courage to share that I was partaking in drugs as well. Like, I really just did not have the balls to admit to it myself. And the thing was, is like he could really see my innocence too through all the heavy crying and also the fact that I didn't know that I was party to a crime. And so the thing was, is both the guys were stealing from two different counties. And so because of that, and they already had a microscope under this Joe guy, as they were telling me in the beginning, so they were really after him. And so in that county, being interviewed by the detective, he really was like going back and forth between asking me a whole bunch of questions, but then also being like, you need to leave him. He is trash, like he is no good for you, kind of thing. And we ended up getting sent off to the other county station. Didn't get interviewed, but we eventually got released after getting booked in. And when we got released, a crazy part of it that I think is wild is the fact that, like, I mean, we were already just strapped extremely thin as far as our bank accounts go from all the drugs and such. I was the only one with an actual job at the time, and my ex and that guy Joe were the ones stealing tools from a bunch of like flea markets and Home Depots and such, and then reselling them. And I only had $35 to my name, but in cash in my wallet. My phone was at like 10% battery. And when I was waiting to be interviewed, the cops were nice enough to let me charge my phone. But by the time we eventually got released from both county jails, we were struggling because like we tried calling an Uber and then my phone died. So, and he didn't have a phone. So we were like, well, what now? And then we were like begging the station to let us call for a taxi. And we called a taxi. We finally arrived and it was like the most like, it was like such an adrenaline rush being in that taxi going all the way home because we were like, are we gonna have enough money? What if we don't have enough money? I only have $35. Taxis are expensive, like they really are. And so we had literally just enough, no extra for tip, but just enough to get us there. And then by that time, I was already negative in my account. My ex was stealing money from me too if I didn't forfeit automatically and submit. So then once we got released, luckily we were able to go to my ex's friend's place and we detoxed in bed for like 3, 4 days, barely any water, no shower, no food. You don't feel like it when you're detoxing. During those few days, I dropped about 30, 40 pounds. And then all of a sudden, I get a call from my ex's mom, Michelle. She's like, I'm coming to pick you up. So I jump in the shower with all my strength of what was little left. And she picks me up. I see that my bags are packed. And she's like, I've talked to your mom. You're going to get on a plane in 2 hours, right? And I was like, yeah. And that was really hard because I didn't really say goodbye to my ex, and I didn't think I was going to be separated from him, of course. And the next thing you know, I'm bringing my dog Mocha with me. We're jumping on the plane, and I'm being sent back to California. And I go and stay with my mom and stepdad up in Forest Hill, and they took care of Mocha for me while I was detoxing. Um, I detoxed for a good month until I was finally sober. The funniest part, I think, was like getting off the plane. My stepdad and his firecracker personality says, "You look like Schmeagol." And it was like the first belly laugh I had in months. And I just kind of was like, shook it off, whatever. But then after a week of being home, he was like, "Oh my God, you finally have color back in you. Like, you really looked like shit." And it was true for sure. Um, and then after about a month living at home, my friend offered to move me and Mocha, my dog, down to San Diego for a fresh new start. I wanted to be away from family just so I can feel free and feel like an adult again. I realized I was like, this is like a second chance at life. And to back it up, like there was two separate occasions during our drug addiction that I had two near-death experiences of overdosing. Um, One of them I know the story of thanks to my ex, and I know it was off fentanyl, not heroin. But the other one, the other story, I'm sure is pretty similar. I just don't know of it. I blacked out. And then I spent a good year and a half in San Diego, going through an emotional roller coaster of my life, just trying to feel normal again, just trying to enjoy life and just breathe because it felt like the only thing I could really do. And so I met a lot of great friends. I was very active throughout San Diego, and I actually met someone, my first friend, Tony, who who ended up having a very parallel story to mine, but in his situation, he was the the boyfriend in my story. So it's like we had both sides of the perspective, and we ended up going to Naranon meetings together. He helped me find the right fit. And then afterwards, we'd end up just sitting in the car and just chatting. And it was great because I can give my perspective as the victim side of the situation, right? Like someone who was influenced. And he was able to share his side of the story where he was the antagonizer, the person with the addict, and everything he put his girlfriend through and such. So it was an interesting dynamic, but I feel like it was such a blessing to be able to meet him. And to this day, he's still one of my best friends, even though he lives in San Diego. And we stay close, and we really helped each other heal and grow and just also enjoy life in San Diego. And then after San Diego during COVID, I decided to move back to LA, try it all over again. But at the same time, it was also really hard because all my memories in LA were with my ex. And so it's like everywhere I looked, it's like trying to change the narrative to just me and just me and Mocha. And Mocha is my baby that I got with my ex too. So there's like that perspective as well, where it's like, seeing her, I would see my ex too. And this was our family. This was the love of my life. She, of course, the baby. and so once I got back to LA, I got back into the film industry, started jumping back into acting classes and getting back into modeling, something that I've been very passionate about, something that was actually growing pretty rapidly for the first 2 years in LA, up until I left LA. And and then I just started kind of working more on myself and really trying to dig deep into just like healing myself and healing everything that I went through. And it took me a few years actually to even just start owning my story instead of feeling like a victim to it. Because that's how I felt. And also, my ex was like, listen, I did this to you. Blame it all on me. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. And it's like, yeah, in a way, I definitely do blame him for his influence on me. But at the same time, like, I had to take ownership for myself because I made the choices. I'm the one who snorted heroin. I'm the one who, decided to do crack as well on top of that and sit in the car while they steal tools and all that. But I didn't really, I thought I was healing. I even tried going to a therapist at one point. I knew my mission. I told her my mission. I want to face this demon on my own and really work through it because I've learned that Nar-Anon meetings don't work for me anymore. I did it for a good 2 years when I really needed to not only release, but also find validation in reasons to not go back to my ex because he truly had my whole heart. I gave absolutely all of me and more to him that I've never given to anybody else. And so at this point, we were married, even though we were separated in two different states. And I really just needed more reason, like, don't go back to him, don't go back to him, because my heart just has always screamed for this man. And fast forward a little bit, I eventually, after 3 years, got into a natural relationship with someone. It lasted a year, and about halfway into it, he started bringing up a lot of drama. He kind of was the lost puppy that just didn't know what he wanted in life and didn't know where he was at. He had a lot of baggage of his own traumas and such, but it also was very healing where I can start to purposely be vulnerable and be open and honest and try to heal things that I didn't have in my relationship with my ex. but this guy just showed a lot of toxic traits. And I've always been very in tune with my intuition, my subconscious, and it just started speaking to me louder and started showing me, like, this guy, he's showing some similar traits that you already experienced with your ex. And so my subconscious kind of just told me, all right, it's time to get out, it's time to run. Like, things kind of really blew up towards the end.
Mhm.
And he indirectly told me right before my birthday that he wanted to cheat on me like he cheated on his wife. And so right after my birthday, I was like, okay, this is the last straw. I also was setting up an amazing trip, half business, half pleasure, to go to Italy in July. And the beginning of June was my birthday. And I was like, you know what? It's time to just let this go so I can go to Italy, have a great time by myself. And I broke up with him right after my birthday, which was only a few weeks before Italy. And when I broke up with him, his reaction was to start love bombing me and just attacking me and try to manipulate me back into his arms, and that everything is going to get better, blah, blah, blah. All those lies and empty promises kind of thing. And through all that antagonizing, it created what I called in my book a trauma bomb explosion, where I dropped 10 pounds in 2 weeks, which made me on a unhealthy range of skinny. And I couldn't gain any weight. My body just went under physical anxiety. Like, my body was constantly pulsing and I just couldn't calm down. Almost like if someone took like 5 caterpillars of cocaine and they just couldn't stop moving and they have no focus, like they're just all over the place. It's kind of like how my body was reacting. And then in Italy, I went by myself, my very first Europe trip in general. And my plan was go to Italy for 2 weeks. And during the middle of it was a intensive course through my acting program, and which is the reason for me going. I had an amazing time. It was really crazy, especially under that kind of influence that my body was going through. And it made things a lot more chaotic, but I just did my best to enjoy the ride and cry if I needed to or whatnot. But I cried heavily. For the first time too, in a Tuscany resort, I felt claustrophobia for the first time. And luckily for the technique that I was learning, the Alexander technique, it helps you to connect your mind to your body. And luckily, through learning it, I tried to ground myself and to not panic and not to freak out. I was stuck in the bathroom for a good hour, and no one can get me out until they finally did. But then once I finally got out, a few hours later, I had my first panic attack down at the pool by myself. And if anybody's experienced a panic attack, it feels like a knife is digging into your chest and that your rib cages are just closing in and you just can't breathe. And it's one of the scariest feelings. And from that moment on, I continued to have panic attacks, whether it was triggered by something that caused a little anxiety or nothing at all, mostly nothing at all. Panic attacks would just come through like crazy. It prevented me from going out, from leaving my home, from going to work. I even quit one job because I noticed that it caused so much anxiety in my life. But I went through 6 months ultimately of this huge healing journey where I had the worst physical anxiety. I continued to drop weight where I was just skin and bones and I couldn't gain weight. I spent every weekend eating carbs and pizzas and every carb that I can get my hands on. I ate. Nothing helped me gain weight. I would be in and out of the doctors too because of because I originally thought that I had some type of allergy infection when I came back from Italy. And instead, they just threw me into an EKG, threw me to a psychiatrist, tried to put me on anti-anxiety, antidepressants. And my intuition spoke to me like, this is just temporary. Like, you're gonna fight through it. You got this. Don't do the meds. And so I spent those 6 months mostly isolating myself, but then I also just learned that, you know what, I need to, instead of blaming my ex for everything, I need to start forgiving myself and I need to
Mm.
learn how to love myself. And that's kind of a motto that's heavily in my book, but also something my dad told me at a very young age. And because I would let drama just consume me and consume my emotions and overshadow any homework or fun activities. It's like drama was, everything in my life because I'm such an empathetic creature and I love to make other people happy. Well, I started digging into myself and just learning to love myself, forgiving myself and I leached on to sound baths and meditations. I also tried Reiki, which Reiki was something that heavily changed me. I found an amazing master in Torrance over here in LA where he's done the miracle work with other testimonials, but with me, it just completely changed everything. And after about 6 months, I finally stepped into 2024, just a brand new person. Um, but also, I skipped over a big part is 2 years ago, when I was actually with that last boyfriend, right after my birthday, no, right before my birthday, I should say, um, I was planning to go to Costa Rica with him. I wanted to go out with a bang for my big 30th birthday, and I didn't want to go alone. I asked my new boyfriend to come with me. So we planned a trip around my birthday, early June, to go to Costa Rica. And right before, I hit a sciatic nerve, which was excruciating pain. I've never felt that before. And I had a doctor appointment set up to go see someone about it. And another crazy little incident is right before I saw the doctor in regards to hitting a sciatic nerve, I actually went to a psychic. And this was the second time I went to the same psychic. And the first time I went, it was with my friend, and we were just like, what do we want to do? And we just randomly decided on seeing a psychic, but keeping an open mind, taking it with a grain of salt. But this lady was so spot on with both of us in so many ways that we both just kind of walked out of there like, oh my gosh, like how did she know? Like this is crazy. And so I went to her a second time, and this time though, it was all negative. Everything she was saying was negative. It was a combination package of a psychic reading plus a tarot card, and she would put a crystal on the most important card. Well, the most important card was the death card. And so she kept drilling it into me like a mom, like, you need to go see the doctor or else death could be around the corner, kind of thing. And I'm just like, I have a doctor appointment next week. I'm gonna keep an open mind, but I'm not gonna like let this lady affect me in that kind of way because that's a very serious like suggestion. And when I went to the doctor, I was like, listen, doc, like my mom's side of the family has had cancer, living and past, and they've all kind of passed away from cancer, and I really need to be checked out. Like, I know I have this problem, and it's gotten to the point where I've done a colon cleanse, I've done at-home food tests to see like what foods I need to avoid. I avoided those foods, but my stomach keeps getting worse, and everything I eat is just sinking my energy. And and so they immediately kind of like eyes popping out of their head, like, all right, let's throw you into some tests. Let's figure out what's going on. First test was an ultrasound, And immediately they found something, and I'm just like, what's going on? Can you please tell me? Please tell me. And they're like, well, we found a tumor. And she brings in another lady for another opinion. And that same lady also was like, okay, we found something. Like, this definitely needs some help. And from then on out, it was 3 months straight of just being a frequent flyer at the hospital, in and out of blood tests and MRIs and CAT scans and all sorts of tests, and just hearing the word tumor getting thrown around left and right. And for me, cancer has been my number one biggest fear in life. At a very young age, I watched my grandmother um, go from normal to just completely depleted on into her hospital bed from lung cancer and a brain tumor. And I helped take care of her for a good year and a half before the day she passed. And so, being an 11-year-old watching that,
Mhm.
it definitely shook me up. And my grandmother was one of my most favorite family members ever. And so, the day finally came after 3 months in the hospital of all these tests, and they diagnosed me with an extremely rare pancreatic cancer called neuroendocrine. And at this point, I felt like I did a pretty good job of keeping up with all these doctor visits. Every single test I took, a few hours later, I would get the doctor's notes and the reports all sent over to my app with my medical records. And any big medical term I would find, I would just Google search it. And I did so much investigative work through my own doctor's notes so I can at least get ahead of the game, or at least try to catch up to try to understand, okay, what is going on with me? They keep saying tumor, 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 tumor. I'm scared shitless. And so once they did diagnose me, they were like, all right, we need to throw you into surgery now. And I decided to put it on pause for a moment so I can go back home to NorCal, spend some time with family. And then after that, all my parents came down, my parents and then my step parents all came down to support me for the journey. And it was a 7 hour long surgery called a Whipple surgery, very intense. Luckily, they're so much better about it now. And I'm grateful that the hospital I was at was apparently the best rated for Whipple surgery because it's a very dangerous one. It pretty much reconstructs my whole digestive system, taking out the stomach lining where it connects all the organs and creating a new stomach lining so all the organs can connect but also flow into the large intestines. And so they ripped me open from the top of my abdominals all the way down to underneath my belly button. They did a beautiful job of a straight line scar. And then they also had two tubes on my hip bone to drain out all the fluids. So I got a big long scar down the center of my stomach and a few dots on my side. And then I was bed rested for a solid almost 2 months after that. And I'm grateful that my mom decided to work from home. She stayed with me, she fed me, took care of me, all my chores, my dog. I got such a warrior mentality that I was like, no, like 2 weeks after, I'll be fine. I'll be back to work. Like, I can't just not work. And they're like, no, like, you need at least 2 months off, 1 week in the hospital, and then 2 months after that to completely rehabilitate your body. And with that surgery, I lost another 20 pounds. So I was again skin and bones. And I literally was on a liquid diet for the first week. And it wasn't until like a few weeks in that I could finally start eating what was like a normal meal, even though my stomach after surgery was half the size and I can't eat a full meal ever again. So, so it's definitely messed with my body, and it's been 2 years now, and I'm still honestly learning how to cooperate with my body so it gets the right nutrition. But I have to eat small meals forever, And yeah, I'm under surveillance for the next 3 years on top of the last two, and just continually going through all that medical stuff. And yeah.
Wow. You know what? You're a testament to just being kind to everybody because just looking at you, all the things you've told me, all the things you've been through, just like that perception, you'd never think it. Like you watch the show Intervention and that kind of stuff, and you see someone that looks like they've been dragged through the alley, and I'm sure you know what I mean. Just like, but just looking at you, if I just started talking to you right now, I never would have guessed that you went through any of that stuff. But it's just that perception, and that's what's just try not to be a douchebag to anybody because you never know what someone's going through across the way from you. Um, I do gotta ask you though, when you first started dating the first guy and
Yeah,
you knew he was an addict, kind of knew what you were walking into, was there a lot of pressure, like when you went to parties and stuff, where there was people all around you doing this? Like, did you
that's the
kind of
thing
cave to
is,
that?
yeah, that's the thing is like me and him we weren't into going to parties. Like I wanted to have like one drink maybe once every 3 months. But even then he wasn't even about it. He's like, no, like we were both big into fitness and we would go to the gym together, work out together. Like we were that kind of power couple in the gym. Like he was teaching me how to train properly and all that. My body was transforming. So it's like we were never like really into drinking. We smoked weed at night just to like like chill out and just like have a good night's sleep. But other than the weed, like we weren't heavily drinking or anything. Like the heavy drinking didn't actually begin until we went to Wisconsin. And that was kind of the beginning of us getting addicted again. Is like we were heavily partying like most nights a week at one bar that also had a connection to cocaine. So it was a lot of heavy drinking and a lot of cocaine. And it was multiple nights in 1 week. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Or leading up to our wedding day, I even was like, listen, if this doesn't stop, like, I'm not getting married to you. Like, this is way too much. This is not what I signed up for. And of course, like everything's gonna change. I fell for it and we got married anyways. And then we got back into heroin and then added crack
How
and
are
cigarettes.
you? How are you when it comes to like myself? Of course, I was knifed 13 times in an ambulance. So for a lot of years, I couldn't even watch like ER or Chicago Med or any of that stuff. If I'd see anything, I'd freak out and have to turn the channel on. So how are you if you're like, I don't know, watching a movie or Sons of Anarchy or someone's jacking up their arm or doing that stuff? Does that trigger you at all still?
You know what? I've watched myself go through so many different phases, as far as like, you know, getting triggered by stuff like that. I know that when Dope Sick came out on Hulu, I watched it, and that's like all about the opioid crisis when it comes to Oxy, especially. And I bawled my eyes out the whole time. Like it was probably the one show I watched that really gives a good insight to what it feels like to be on heroin and what the withdrawals feel like and such. And there's even there's like a quote that they say in it that I really felt connected to, and I definitely kind of tied it into my book as well, where um, I forget who it was, but he goes, um, if you're without heroin, you feel like dying, but when you're on heroin, you're gonna die. It was something along those lines, and I was like, oh my God, that's like the best way to describe it. Like, but I mean, I definitely am very empathetic. So even just telling my story right now, it definitely stirs up a lot of emotions, and I can feel my body like bringing on anxiety. But I've definitely had to go through it quite a bit. But I've also leaned into it where I'm like, you know what? I know that a big problem I have is suppressing all my feelings and emotions. And when I've dealt with the same kind of men over and over in my life with anger issues who are toxic in many different ways, like I just have suppressed so much and I bottled it up so much that that's why my trauma box explosion happened, I think, is because I just buried it so deep and I felt it so deeply within me. And that's why I tried therapy. But nowadays it's like I'm definitely more lighthearted about it, but at the same time, it's like it's gonna bring the waterfalls automatically. I mean, it's such a challenging part of my life that I also can't help but hold dear to me too.
So the dog that I heard barking before we came on here, is that Mocha? Is that
Yeah.
how old is your dog now? Like that's
She's gonna be 10 this summer, but yeah, she's been through it all with both of us. She's been a part of the whole journey.
dogs are dogs are so amazing. I got divorced almost 3 years ago, and the dog is just over three, so we kind of she's been my homegirl all along.
Yeah,
And
they,
she's not here tonight. She's gone to my kids for a sleepover, and I'm so lost. It's so quiet here. I don't know what to do with myself. Well, I've got my girlfriend here, but the dog, just not having that dog here, you don't realize how much you depend on that energy in the house. How that, you
you
know,
know, yeah, and I'm like, oh, I can get emotional just talking about her, but like I don't know about you, but with my baby Mocha, like she really was like my shining light through the addiction, especially where it's like once I saw myself change and I didn't recognize who I was anymore, being so heavily down the rabbit hole of addiction, like she was the only light I had left in
mm,
my environment, where it's like, you know, the neglection from being so heavily influenced by drugs and then even withdrawals as well. It's like she was the one thing in my life that really just wanted to motivate me and keep me going, especially when I completely changed and I didn't know who I was anymore. I was like, she is the one thing that just, like, yeah, it really influenced me to just want to be better and be sober again.
so what's funny though is that we can talk about all these heavy things. I've talked about every subject on the road so far in all these episodes, but as soon as we mention our dogs, that's when I start to get lumpy throated. And like, if I'm at my desk or I'm having a crappy day at work, I turn around, she's right there with her head on my lap, just trying. She'll push her head into my ribs to give me a hug. So we can talk about all this amazing stuff, and then as soon as we bring up our dogs, or that's it. That's over.
I know it's game over. Like they really are just like the greatest companions, and they give us that unwavering, unconditional love that just it just does so much wonder for us. And I really am beyond grateful that I still have her, that she's with me, she's healthy. She might have some anxiety from seeing so many drug deals go down and whatnot, but ultimately, like, she's happy, she's smiling on the time. And now it's like, I just want to commit my life to giving her an even better life because of all the shit she's been through with me.
Well, it's funny. Myself, I always said I'm gonna stay single until I can find someone that is as happy to see me when I come home as my dog is. So I've found that now.
Yeah,
Um, so once you know someone looks at you the same way your dog does, hang on to them because it's special.
it
Um,
really is.
I got two more things here for you. First of all, if there's someone out there that's struggling or going through any kind of addiction or with someone that's addicted, what's something you'd say to them right now to maybe help them out?
Oh, for someone who's struggling with addiction, oh my gosh. Um, I wish I can say like read my book right now, as it is getting released because it gives a deeper dive into the details of everything that I went through and how I just kind of leached myself on to things that make me happy or just trying new things to get out of my comfort. But with addiction, like no matter what it is, like, oh my God, I feel like it's like I get caught on my words because it's just such a heavy topic. Um, yeah, it's like I want to do nothing but help, but it's also so hard. Like depending on what the addiction is, you just change into a different person, and you really need to find the light for you and like what's going to influence you to want to change and do better because this is no life for anyone and it doesn't upkeep at all.
Yeah.
It really just only makes everything so much worse. And withdrawals from opioids I can speak of is the worst battle. It's its own Olympics. Like it's so heavy to deal with and it's so hard, but if you can at least grab onto family and someone who's gonna help you and help you see that this isn't the life for you, that there is a better way to change your life around than leech on. I mean,
All right, I've got one more question for you, and I promise it's nowhere near as heavy as that one. This is my little funny icebreaker at the end of all these heavy episodes.
yeah.
Um, okay, you ready? There's a 100-meter dash. How many pigeons do you think you could carry 100 meters and have in your arms at the end of the race?
Oh my God. 100 pigeons on 100 meters?
100 meters dash. You grab a bunch of pigeons at the start. How many do you think you still have in your arms at the end of the race?
Probably not many if they're flying away.
Possibly.
But I definitely would hold as many as I can. I'm gonna squeeze them like crazy.
Well, my last guest said she could do 150. She would put double-sided duct tape all over her sweater and just strap the pigeons on, and then more pigeons in her arm, pressed into those pigeons. So that was 150 is the record so far.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Well, we're
Impressive.
gonna we're gonna fire your book. It'll be launching a couple days after this episode launches. I'll put that right in the description, anything you want in the description. And I appreciate you coming on with me and sharing your story, and hopefully it'll help someone out there that's been through the same thing, going through the same thing. Um, it doesn't matter to me if 10 people watch this episode, if 100 people watch it, if 1,000 people watch it. If there's one person out there that could be going down that path and hopefully read your book and then goes down a different path, then it's a great episode.
I agree. All I want to do is just help, inspire.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on with me, and
Thank you.
we'll give Mocha, who's a good boy for me, and a dog and a pat on the head and a milk bone, and we'll be in touch real soon.
Sounds great.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Dave.
Take care.